Whenever you buy a piece of real estate, be it something you're going to live in yourself or something you're going to rent out, you obviously buy the bricks and mortar. You buy the land that the building is sitting on. You buy the trees, the landscaping, the paving, all the improvements. But you also buy an intangible element, something we call the bundle of rights. For example, you have the right to occupy. You have the right to encumber. You have the right to sell. You have the right to renovate. You have the right to demolish if necessary. Some of those are subject to the bylaws and guidelines of your municipality, but you have these rights. When you rent, the tenant is paying you something every month. And the question is, what's he getting in exchange for that? He's not getting ownership of the property at all. And certainly some of these rights are not being given over to the tenant. But what he is getting is the right to quiet enjoyment and the right to occupancy. Obviously, he's not getting the right to demolish, although some tenants haven't got that memo. Then he isn't getting the right to renovate, although I've got a tenant or two who haven't read that memo. But they are getting the right to quiet enjoyment. If I can quote from the Residential Tenancies Act, it says, "A landlord shall not, at any time during a tenant's occupancy of a rental unit, substantially interfere with the reasonable enjoyment of the rental unit by a tenant or a member of his family or household." So the landlord does not have the right to interfere with a tenant has paid for, which is quiet enjoyment and occupancy. But there are certain times that a landlord is allowed to enter the unit. And I want to just go over what those are, or what some of those are. First of all, if the property is being put up for sale, you have the right to dispose of the property. And so you have the right to put it on the market even while the tenant is there. And you or your real estate agent have the right to enter the property to show the property. Now, the Residential Tenancies Act is specific about this. You have to give the tenant a minimum of 24-hour written notice. The showings have to take place during daylight hours, and so on. It's got to be reasonable. And obviously, if it's a single-family home, for example, that's being sold, the tenant's not going to be thrilled because the chances are the new owner is going to want to occupy it, him or herself, and they're going to get evicted. So, and if it's a duplex or a triplex, then they're hoping that it's an investor that's going to be buying it and they feel a little more secure. But so much of it comes down to a good working relationship that the landlord and the tenant has. And if you've got a good working relationship with the tenant, you explain the situation and try and work it out for them and yourself as well. And be as cooperative as you can with them, being reasonable about their comings and goings and their meals and so on, and try and make reasonable time that can work for everybody. You also have the right to enter the premises when it's being rented. In other words, the tenant either has given you notice or he's been given notice that he's being evicted. Either way, you have the right to enter the premises to show it to prospective tenants. And here you do not need to give written notice, and you do not need to give 24-hour notice. In fact, again, I'm quoting from the Act, "A landlord may enter the rental unit without written notice to show the unit to prospective tenants if before entering the unit, the landlord informs or makes a reasonable effort to inform the tenant of his intention to do so." No lead time or anything. You say, "I'm on my way over." And certainly I've found as a landlord, if I've got a real good quality tenant, often they're right here and I can't give the existing tenant the kind of lead time I'd like to. And the more lead time I give, the less likely the prospective tenant is to show up for the appointment. So it's important that you can do that. And again, I find that in this circumstances, tenants are usually pretty good. And in fact, if the carrot is there that, you've given me 2 months notice, but you found another place, or you're moving away, and the tenant says, if you can rent it earlier, and I'll say, I'll do my best to rent it earlier. You're committed for 2 months, but if I can rent it earlier, I will. You'll find they'll be exceptionally cooperative. I've had tenants who've answered the phone and scheduled showings, all kinds of things, because they want to get out early. And if, on the other hand, if the tenant is being evicted, I wouldn't suggest that you show it until the tenant's out. If you got really bad relationship between you and the tenant, it's going to be awkward to show it. And if you can, you're better off to wait till it's vacant, and probably if it needs some repair as well. So you have to judge yourself on that, but you have the right to show it. You also have the right to enter the unit upon emergencies. I got a phone call one day. I had a triplex, and the main floor unit said, Wayne, there's water plummeting down through the ceiling of my bathroom. Well, that's an emergency. I picked up the phone and tried calling the upstairs tenant. I got a hold of him. He had a cell phone, but he's a taxi driver and he was an hour away. I said to him, the emergency, I said, I just want to let you know I've got to go into the unit. He said, sure, by all means, go ahead. Well, I would have gone in anyway. I couldn't have that water cascading down, so I took the key, but I made a phone call and I arranged for a plumber to meet me there, and we went in, and it turned out that the line going to the toilet had broken and water was just cascading all over the floor, and we shut off the water, and he did the repair at the same time. So you have the right to do that with emergency, and even if you can't reach the tenant or notify the tenant, by all means you can go in. I mean, if there's smoke coming out of the unit and there's a possible fire, you're not going to sit around and wait and see if you can locate the tenant. You need to act quickly in case of emergencies. Tied in with it, you also have the right to enter the unit to make repairs. Now, in the example I gave of the broken line going into the toilet, I was able to line up a plumber and do it all at the same time. But if that's not the case, certainly you can arrange for the necessary repairs during the currency of the tenancy. And in fact, most tenants would be very happy about this. I've got a condo unit, and the older lady who's renting it told me that there was a problem with the fridge. Well, I asked her to measure the fridge. She had her son or grandson come over and measure the fridge, and I was a little bit skeptical about the measurement. I wanted to make double sure. I normally don't go to these places myself, but I went over to have a look. While it was an apartment-sized fridge, and I would like to have seen her with a bigger fridge, and the cupboards were quite old. I talked to her about it, and I said, you know, I'll send a kitchen cabinet company in here to have a look, and maybe we'll redo your kitchen. And that's what we're going to do. Going to get her a full-size fridge and brand new kitchen cupboards. Well, she's going to be thrilled. She's going to be without a kitchen for a week or two. She said, I'll go live with my daughter, whatever it takes. You have the right to do these renovations and repairs as necessary. And then finally, you've got the right to enter the unit to make periodic inspections. Now, those inspections may be timed inspections. For example, under fire retrofit legislation, you're supposed to examine the smoke and carbon monoxide detectors periodically, make sure they're functioning, make sure the battery's current and upright. If you have fire extinguishers in the place, you need to periodically examine those. If you have a washer and dryer that you're providing, you're supposed to examine those. And you may want to go in from time to time to examine them. Also, if you've got suspicions that there's something going on in the unit that you're concerned about, maybe another tenant's complaining about noise, it sounds like they're renovating in there, you want to go in. I received a water bill. Normally the tenants pay their own water bill. I received a water bill on a semi I was renting out, and it was over $1,000. What in the world is going on in there? So I called the tenant and I said, I got this huge water bill. You haven't paid it. It's in arrears, but I'd like to come over. I hadn't been in the unit in a long time. I said, I want to make sure you're not doing some hydrophonic program there or something going on. She said, well, come on over. We scheduled it for the next day, and I had to look at the unit. So you have the right as a landlord to do that. I find, and I can't stress this enough, if you work on having a good relationship with your tenants, you don't even have to worry too much about this. They're going to cooperate with you, you're going to cooperate with them, and it will all work out. But if you have a tenant who kind of knows the rules and wants to abide by the rules, you need to know the rules. And so it's a kind of a balance. You've got the right to enter under certain circumstances, but they get the right to quiet enjoyment. Hope that makes sense. I want to thank you for investing the time. I'll talk to you again next week.